Hi, everyone, and welcome to this session. Thanks for taking the time to be with us today as we talk about sales and marketing alignment. My name is Martina. I will be your host today. And during the next 45 minutes, you'll get to hear a perspective from our speakers around these complex topic, around common challenges that bring sales and marketing teams apart and how you can get back on in sync. I'm going to be going through housekeeping. So this webinar is being live streamed. So should you have any audio issues, sometimes closing the webinar tab and reopening will help. But should you still have issues, feel free to let us know using the Ask a Question button, and someone will assist. You will also be receiving the recording of this webinar after the live session ends a bit later today. And finally, this is an opportunity for you to engage with the speaker, so please do not hesitate to send through your questions. We'll be going over them towards the end of the webinar after the panel discussion. Lastly, I'd like to go over our safe harbor statement. This is to let you know that ZoomInfo is a publicly traded company, and this presentation may contain forward-looking statements. Any buying decisions you make should be made based only upon currently available products and offerings. So I'm really excited to have with us two amazing growth leaders, and I can wait to talk to them, and hear from them their insights about sales and marketing alignment and their experience. So welcome to Dom Catabay, Director of Demand Generation at Acton, and Tim Miller, Sales Development Director at ZoomInfo. Thanks both for being with us. Dom, Tim, for those who don't know you, would you like to briefly introduce yourself and tell us a little bit what you've done and where you work?
Yeah. So I'll kick it off. As she said, I'm Dom Catabay, Director of Demand Gen at Acton. I actually used to work at ZoomInfo. As one of my first parts of my career was spent working there. So definitely have have some relationships already with the company prior to this webinar. But was really happy to have a chance to work together with Tim on this. But I own pretty much everything demand gen within Acton. That's all of our inbound channels, our outbound channels, with a huge focus on pipeline generation. So really excited to talk about this topic. I think it's super important for any organization, and Tim's a great partner in discussing it.
Yeah, thanks, Dom. Really excited to get reconnected with you. Dom and I actually had the fortunate opportunity to work together. Dom supported some of my first SDR teams at ZoomInfo. But my name's Tim. Obviously, I've worked at ZoomInfo for the past 4 years, started as an inbound SDR, and now I'm the director of EMEA sales development. So I look over all of our inbound and outbound SDR teams within the UK and Israel. And that's both on the customer and new business side. So I have teams who are fielding inbound leads that are new business and customer, and then having teams supporting our account executive and account management teams to drive pipeline, increase retention rates, and upsell our current customer base. So really excited to be here with you, Dom, and it's great to see you as always.
For sure.
Nice to have you. So yeah, so sales and marketing is such a broad and multifaceted topic, and we'd actually like to hear from the audience what they think, what you folks in the audience think is the biggest contributor to misalignment between sales and marketing teams. You should see this come up as a poll question on your screen. So feel free to choose your answer. So, and that will help orient what the answers really from Tim and Dom. So you still have some, yeah, I see the questions coming through. So I'm gonna give it another 2 seconds and then I'll share the results with you. Okay, so, all right, so most of you say that poor communication is the biggest contributor to siloed marketing and sales teams, followed by misalignment in targets. And yeah, very interesting. Yes, so I'm sure Tim and Dom will be able to talk more about this as we go over this webinar. So, Dom, I'm going to turn this question to you, really. So, in your opinion, what causes sales and marketing teams to struggle when working together?
Yeah, I think in general, I agree with the audience, the 50-ish% of you who say lack of communication. And I think it definitely goes both directions. It's a really dangerous thing when you see, and this happen in a lot of organizations where sales is blaming marketing because the lead quality is not good enough. They're not getting enough leads. Leads aren't a good ICP fit. Or marketing blaming sales, saying, "Oh, you guys aren't converting high enough. What's going on? We're passing you leads. Like, there's an issue here." So I think like the solution to that is definitely being more regimented in the way that you communicate with one another through both process and documentation. So sales needs to be forthright when marketing is passing your leads with sharing what's working, what's not. They're collecting both qualitative and quantitative feedback. It's not enough to have one or the other. Like, you need to have both because they're both important. And on the marketing end of things, like, there needs to be a clear process for passing leads to the sales team. When they launch new campaigns, there should be documentation highlighting, hey, this is what we're focusing on. This is what our goals are. This is what we expect from you guys as the people who are going to be following up on the leads that are coming through this campaign. And the combination of those two things really make for a much better stream of communication between both teams. And it doesn't end at that. I know Tim probably has some great feedback here as well, because from my experience working with ZoomInfo, like, feedback and communication is really well done there. So I'd love to hear your 2 cents on that portion, Tim.
Yeah, for sure. And I think communication is, the biggest gap in, having a unified team. And ultimately, it's like a continuous feedback loop. I'm sure, a lot of people on this call, you have your regular sales and marketing meetings where, you're talking about ideas for campaigns. But I think, more importantly, it's about the continuous feedback loop of, and, me personally, I probably have 3 or 4 calls with marketing per week, depending on, what segment of the business we're talking about, whether that's, reviewing some of our hot leads that come to our website, reviewing, some of the data that comes from our colder campaigns. And I think, you really need to review the whole sales and marketing funnel from top to bottom and, understand like what's working, what's not working, what levers you can pull to, see that spike in performance. And I think, more specifically from like an outbound perspective, I think a lot of times sales and marketing teams can operate siloed. And, in my experience, the way to get the most out of the marketing campaigns, especially from an outbound perspective, is understanding like when the sales team is going out and they're self-sourcing, their own meetings or, their own opportunities in pipeline, what industries are they focused on? What features are resonating with certain size, companies that you're trying to sell, and your sellers are going to be more motivated to work the campaigns in areas where they're already having success. So if you can do some of that work for them, you should see, an increase in results and an increase in attention on those campaigns that you're putting in front of your team. And ultimately, like, if you have an outbound team and you're going outbound, like, having a tool like Act On to be able to streamline, these campaigns and get data and get accounts and contacts in front of your teams to work is ultimately what's going to allow you to have, multiple touch points on multiple different accounts and really be, streamlined and focused in what you're doing. And, I think it's discussing the data challenges as well. Like, marketing might have sent out a campaign that didn't get worked as much from sales. Well, why is that? Is it, the industries aren't right? Are the company sizes too small? Are they too big? Is the contact information, not relevant? And I think a lot of times it's sales management communicating with, the marketing team, when ultimately you need to find that feedback loop with the reps directly and the marketing team. So it's like having, maybe surveys where the marketing team surveys the sales team. How have the campaigns been? What's been working? What's not working? Having like Slack channels or Teams channels where they can request, tweaks to the campaign. Maybe the campaign launched a week ago, and it would be better if, X, Y, and Z was taken out of it. If the marketing team can go back, take that stuff out of it, and now the sales team is more focused on ultimately what's generating results. So I think a lot of times we talk about alignment between sales and marketing, and it's sales leaders talking to marketing leaders, but the people on the front lines aren't actually giving that feedback directly to marketing, and they're ultimately the ones who are going to be working those campaigns.
Yeah, great points there. And I think it also kind of taking a step back beyond the communication portion. And this one, I was surprised to see not as many people selecting it, but misalignment in tech stack can cause a lot of these problems. I think naturally sales and marketing teams are going to work out of different tools. And when you have different tools that each team is looking at, there's always going to be an issue if you don't have consistency in data flow and data points, because not everyone's looking at the same thing. So it's important to have having solutions that can kind of clean up your data. Shameless plug of ZoomInfo here, data flowing between systems needs to be accurate and actionable. And if you don't have a solution in place to make your data, put your data into that state, you're always going to have the conversation of, if you don't get enough leads or enough data coming in with the leads that you're sourcing, you're not going to be able to make definitive statements on what's working and what's not. And I think this goes down the line to targets as well. I see a lot of people mentioning from a Q&A or in the QA chat things around misalignment in targets. One example of marketing measuring success is pipeline created and sales measuring at revenue generated. The alignment of the tech stack allows you to really see that funnel from start to finish. And that is a great point as well. There needs to be an alignment in targets in order for the teams to judge success from the same view. Because if marketing is only looking at pipeline generated or MQLs generated, and sales is looking at everything beyond that, then they're never going to be having the same conversation about what's working and what's not.
Thank you. And, staying on this point about having the same targets, right, and measuring those targets. So what metrics can be used and be reviewed constantly to maintain alignment between the two teams?
Yeah, I mean, ultimately, every marketing team is going to have their channel-based metrics that they look at, and they're important. I'm not going to dissuade you from looking at them, because they're what help tell you what levers to pull if you need to increase the leads or increase the quality of your leads. But beyond that, I'd say pipeline generation is always going to be the gold standard for a marketing team, with a splash of conversion rates. So the goal of the go-to-market team as a whole is always going to be to generate revenue. And for a marketing team, that doesn't just stop at pipeline. So I say pipeline is the gold standard, but they need to be looking at revenue as well, because if you're creating pipeline that's not converting to close won customers, then it's not creating pipeline it's not pipeline that you need. And there's a lot of things you can do to fix that. It's not an easy problem to fix. But the things that we look at beyond that are things like cost per MQL, cost per opportunity created. And this helps understand how much you're paying to generate those opportunities, because then you can turn off the channels that aren't producing high quality opportunities, as well as the channels that aren't producing opportunities at all. And then the last one for sure is, like I said, is conversion rates. Not just conversion rates in channel, like how many people are viewing your content and filling out forms, but seeing of the leads that you're passing over to your sales team, how many of them are turning into demos, how many of them are turning into opportunities, how many of them are closing and becoming close won. And you have to look at conversion rates at every stage of the funnel, because the action you need to take to fix those conversion rates at each stage of the funnel is going to look a little bit different. And it does really go back to that communication aspect of getting a good understanding of why are we seeing a drop off at the opportunity stage? Why are we seeing a drop off at the meetings book stage? And having those conversion rates as a core KPI you're looking at allows you to decide that when you need to dig in further into those areas.
I would agree, Dom. I think there's so many metrics that can be reviewed and analyzed and picked apart. And I think, where a lot of teams could do better is that they look at things too broadly, or they look at, high level metrics. So maybe you're, a company that operates within multiple different regions, and, it's so important to break down how things are performing in different segments of your business. what's working in SMB that isn't, what's working in enterprise that isn't working in SMB, and, pivoting and adjusting that messaging, the strategy, how you're, generating this interest, and how those, specific prospects or companies are performing down funnel. Like for me, for instance, moving to the EMEA teams, it's like there's things that the EMEA team does really well that North America might struggle with, or there might be things that North America does really well that the EMEA team struggles with, and we're constantly breaking things down to better understand, okay, what's happening within this specific region, and finding the reason why the data is saying what it is. Like the data makes you aware of the story when you're looking at the funnel, but it's really analyzing it and breaking it down is what's going to tell you that story and how you're going to, drive better results within your business. Down funnel is, really getting into the nitty-gritty details of, each gap within the funnel, and then like picking it apart, prying at it, unpacking it, and continuing to revisit and have that continuous feedback loop so you can, continue and maintain that alignment, which is just going to build trust within both departments.
Okay, so yeah, misalignment of data, I think was one of the sort of like responses that the audience gave earlier. So, but so thanks for expanding on that. So, looking beyond data, and what initiatives have you implemented in your organizations, in your career, or have you seen implemented to improve alignment between the two teams or departments? Team, perhaps would you like to start with this one?
Yeah, for sure. And I think I touched on a few of them already. It's, it's your weekly sales and marketing meetings where you're reviewing that funnel, you're reviewing the campaigns. It's having those open, forums where people can give, honest feedback about, how the campaign's performing, or, what they're working on, what could make it better. But ultimately, some of the best findings that I've had is, almost doing like siloed data reviews, and, having marketing go pull things apart and having sales go pull things apart. And it's like, what's marketing seeing that sales isn't, and vice versa, and understanding, which levers can be pulled to, achieve those desired results. I think another thing just to, improve continuous alignment is like keeping a really good, like detailed log of what plays are working at specific times within the year. At least, within ZoomInfo, there's campaigns that do, much better for us at the end of the quarter, at the end of the year compared to the beginning of the year. And, keeping track of, when certain types of campaigns are performing at different points, and, being able to rerun those year after year, and then, make those adjustments that are needed. But ultimately it's, making feedback continuous in real time, and like being able to pivot campaigns in real time, like making those on the go adjustments. I can't tell you how many times I've been like sent a campaign from marketing. It looks really good. There's a ton of accounts in it. But we want to break that down. Maybe now we took, one campaign, we broke it down into 3. We're still working that campaign, but we've just made it easier for our sellers to digest and, go through and work through it with confidence.
Yeah, I love the mention of the pivoting portion. I think all too often you see marketing teams come up with this great idea, or they derive this great idea from someone in the front lines on sales, and launch a campaign, and then they kind of move on to the next thing. I think it's super important to go back and continue to iterate on those campaigns, because ultimately, as Tim's mentioned, like that feedback loop allows marketing to get the frontline info on what's working and what's not. And if marketing isn't listening for that, they're going to continue to run a campaign without making those iterations that really drive success. And I think that shows up not just in campaign launch, but with your lead scoring model, for example, like making sure that you're hearing what they're saying. If there's a certain ICP that's coming in, or not ICP, a certain persona that's coming in, and it just doesn't convert, like you need to make adjustments to that model to make sure that the leads that you're passing to your sales team are fitting the mold of what they need to see in order to drive pipeline and revenue. And adding to the siloed data review that Tim mentioned, I think like that is a super valuable exercise. I think when when I'm looking at the success of campaigns or of a channel or of a batch of leads, like the things I'm looking for are always going to be just naturally are going to be a little bit different than what sales is looking at. And having you do the exercise separately and then come back together and saying like, hey, this is what I found, gives you a chance to really have a discussion, and rather than it being pointing fingers at one another saying, hey, this was messed up, you guys didn't do this right, hey, this is messed up, you need to fix it. And it makes it more of a group activity of like, hey, these are the things that we need to look at and fix. How do we do this? Create an action plan to that. So yeah, I think those were definitely agreeing with Tim and those points for how you can help with that alignment.
We got a comment in from Okanesa saying it's useful for marketing to spend a day on the sales floor. So much insight to be had from that. What would you think?
I mean, I love it. When I was at ZoomInfo, they have their demo day there, which I don't know if everyone's heard of that, but one of the things that we did, especially when it first kicked off, when the sales team wasn't however big it is now, was some of the marketing leaders would go and jump on the phones for an hour during the demo day, call through some of the lists that we were helping build for them. And I think it creates a sense of camaraderie, and it really shows you, like, I was an SDR before I was in marketing. Being an SDR is a really hard job. Being a sales rep is a really hard job. Like, you're not just selling a product, you need to understand people and take what you're hearing and pivot with that in real time. Versus marketing, I have some time to sit and think on things. So beyond just the impact of like being there and hearing things live, like living the life, it just gives you a better view of like what you're passing. So when I'm passing leads, I'm not just thinking, oh, this is an MQL, we need to hit our conversion rate. I'm thinking, would I want to call this lead? Probably not. Let's come revisit that and see what we can do to make it better.
Yeah, definitely. And then, I mean, we've got another comment. This is the mindset of being. The mindset of being a full revenue team is the way to go, I believe. Yes, and you know, what practical problems can a revenue team or revenue operations team that supports both sales and marketing resolve? You know, Dom. Would you like to take this first?
Sure. Yeah, I think, I mean, having a revenue ops team is like the best step you take to ensure all your systems and processes are flowing smoothly and properly. If you look at like traditional sales and marketing orgs, you have your sales ops and your marketing ops. And there's nothing wrong with that. I think like they generally are going to have slightly different problems and focuses, which is totally okay. But I think RevOps is it's a newer function that's coming and trying to really pull them together to have one singular focus. And I think it creates a little bit more efficiency than having them separately. And that's not to say a RevOps team kind of eliminates sales and marketing ops. Like there's still going to be professionals within each team that are focused on the sales stack or focused on the marketing stack and the processes that fall underneath each. But at the leadership level, you know that there's going to be some level of correlation and this driving of direction that happens with that single management structure. I think the most valuable point in my mind is it creates a single point of contact for all things operations. Because I think one thing we see, and we don't have internally, we have sales ops and marketing ops still a little separated. So sometimes we'll see things where it's like, hey, this lead came through, what was the issue? And it was a Salesforce problem, but because it's a lead, they come to marketing to ask about it. And having that single point of contact in a RevOps team means that they can kind of pull in, they queue it, they digest the question and understand where it goes to, and then they can redirect it. Versus it almost sometimes it feels like we're pointing fingers and we're like, oh no, it's not something that we did. Sales ops needs to fix it. So I think that's another value that comes with it is it allows for just quicker and easier updates and builds when it comes to deploying new solutions, new technologies. And then the other thing, like CRM and marketing automation are probably the two biggest and most important technologies in the tech stack when it comes to making sure things flow and connect. If you have a single person or a single team managing that, they can be hyper-focused on making sure that the data points that come together are named the same and they have the same things, filling values in each of those, which you don't always get when you have the team separated.
Yeah, I would agree, Dom. I think the way I like to look at it is like RevOps is almost like the peacekeeper, I guess you could say. It's like, when you have sales ops and marketing ops completely separate, it's like sales kind of has their sidekick, marketing has their sidekick, and you're right, it becomes like a pointing fingers games, and RevOps should ultimately be like the glue that keeps sales and marketing aligned and intact. And I think you said it best. It's having that tech stack that's integrated, that's aligned. Everybody's priorities are the same, and it's not marketing's trying to solve a challenge and sales is trying to solve a challenge, but there's no communication in between. And when you have that one sole RevOps team who's looking out for both sales interest and marketing interest, everything's just going to ultimately flow and operate at a higher level. You're going to be in better communication. You're going to be using the same data points. You're going to be using the same filters in your CRM, and ultimately you're going to be talking the same language. And you can't have that great communication and feedback loop without speaking the same language, being aligned, focused, and ultimately trying to achieve the same goals.
Yeah, and we got like a few comments around this, so I think it's a question that sparked a little bit of an interest. So thank you both. So when it comes to data and technology, really, can you expand a little bit more, Dom, on how data can be functional to create and maintain alignment?
Yeah, I mean, surface level data is probably one of the most important aspects of your sales and marketing programs and systems. Like the data you have coming in is inaccurate or inconsistent. Like it causes confusion for both sales and the marketing teams. So like the data portion is important to make sure that everybody who's looking at your systems, everyone who's looking at programs and success and their KPIs and whatnot, like it makes sure that everyone's looking at the same picture. So I mentioned before, like tools like ZoomInfo get you create a single source of truth. And I think the most important piece with the data solution is like if everyone's looking at the same solution, the answers are always going to look the same whether they're looking at CRM or marketing automation or any of their additional technologies that they have attached to their tech stack. And that's super key. And the other piece is definitely proper data flow between the systems to remove data silos. I think we mentioned data silos a couple times, and having a solution not only to inject data into the system, but to ensure that the data is flowing properly. So Acton is a marketing automation solution. So if like the thing that we tout when it comes to this regard is that you need to have integrations. I think not just basic integrations, but really deep integrations, especially between CRM and marketing automation, because for sales, CRM is the source of truth. For marketing automation is the source of the truth. So making sure you have that really deep and connected system of truth between the two of them is what allows you to drive success on a go-to-market perspective. And then I think the last piece is like the data you're collecting should be informative. There's always going to be these data points that are kind of they might be helpful in one regard, but not another. And those are the types of fields that I would probably create or make hidden in CRM or hidden in marketing automation. So you can pull them in the back end if you need them, but they're not necessarily going to be important. But when you're pulling data out of a system, like you should be thinking about what you need to do with it and only focused on the stuff that's going to help with that decision making. Because otherwise it gets messy. I don't know the exact amount of data, but I've read studies recently where like the more data points you add to your data set, the easier it is for things to get misconstrued and for you to pull or to get to the wrong conclusion. So focusing on that piece is really important as well.
Yeah, I think it's focusing on the data points that are ultimately going to drive the results that you're looking for. The one thing I would like note is like all the parties who are involved in these campaigns, though, whether it's marketing, whether it's the sales team, the SDR team, everyone needs to be able to access and analyze and digest the data in ways that makes sense for their role ultimately. Like an AE may use or look at completely different data points than what an SDR necessarily looks like, or somebody in demand generation might look at data completely different than somebody in the ABM. So it's like having or giving your people or your reps or your marketers internally the ability to access this data. And like, when an SDR books a meeting for a marketing campaign, does the AE know where that data is coming from? Do they have access to that same level of data as, the SDR team had or as the marketing team had? And, it's really important that it's going to be accurate from the top down. And ultimately just being accessible. I think you need to, ultimately understand the data in different ways depending on what role you're in. It's like, something like that ZoomInfo sells is intent data, which allows you to understand, which companies are increasing or doing high amounts of research on the solution or service that you sell. And it's even more valuable when you put it into, marketing automation tools and it's leveraged at scale. But if your sellers don't understand where this data is coming from, how it's sourced, or the reason behind the campaigns, your alignment's going to be broken right there. And you're going to be throwing, dollars out the window because you're investing in all this tech, but you're only giving half of your team access to the data. And, it's not being explained and there's not an understanding of where it's ultimately coming from. It's like, you can have, or a basketball coach can have the best playbook full of plays, but if he never shares with the team how he came up with them, or he only shares with the team that, 10 minutes before the actual game, if people don't know the details of the plays, they're never going to be able to execute them as best as possible. And, I see this a lot of times with companies who bring on ZoomInfo who are maybe at a smaller scale. They have, one marketing person, 3 SDRs and, 2 people who are managing or closing business. And they'll buy ZoomInfo for, their marketing team, the one marketer. But then they don't give licenses to, the sellers who are ultimately on the front lines engaging with these companies. Well, it's great that, the marketing team has the ability to set the sales team up with all these strong campaigns backed by intelligence. If the sellers don't have access to take it that step further, to find that next contact or to be able to, get the contact information for the referral that they're given, then that campaign can only be as successful as, that first touch point. The sales team can't go even past that. So you're not getting your full potential out of your tech stack, by minimizing the amount of people that have access to all of the data that's in front of them.
Okay, got it. So I've got one more question for you, and then we can go over the questions that we've received. So, all in all, what would you say is the most important factor in creating alignment between sales and marketing team? I'll directly see you first.
I think we all said it. I think the crowd agreed with us as well, but it's just clear communication. It's like super important to just be honest and like not take things personal. Like sales can't be hesitant to give, harsh or direct feedback to marketing, and it goes for marketing as well. Like they can't be, hesitant to tell sales like, hey, you haven't put enough touch points into this. Your team hasn't worked the leads, hard enough, or they haven't worked the accounts hard enough. You need to be able to give that direct feedback, and the feedback also needs to come not just from a high level. You need to talk to the individual contributors who are calling through the campaigns, who are working the accounts, and understand what's going on with the people on the front lines who are working the campaigns. Take ownership. The sales team needs to take ownership of gathering that feedback to give it back to marketing so that they can support you, even more and more down the line. And it's looking past what the data is saying, and it's understanding it. It's diving into the details. It's prying at it, and ultimately communicating back and forth between the teams.
Yeah, I agree there. I think and one of the product of this is trust. Ultimately, like the sales team needs to trust the leads that marketing is passing have been vetted, have a convertible quality, and marketing needs to trust that sales is putting in the effort needed in order to convert on the leads that they are passing. So it's two sides of the same coin. I think that it is a product of a ton of things. To mention clear communication, we've talked about the clean and accurate data flow from system to system. One big one that Tim mentioned is really dropping the ego when it comes to providing and receiving feedback. I think like ultimately marketing and sales, we're like I said, we're two sides of the same coin. We're all driving towards the same goal of creating revenue for the company. That's how we keep our jobs. That's how we make our company grow and create more jobs for others to join us. And I think like if you get too caught up in like, oh, this works for me, why is there a problem for you? Like that causes a breakdown in trust, as well as it really creates an environment where people are pointing fingers and saying, oh, they're not doing what they need to do. They're not doing what they need to do. And I think for marketing specifically, the piece that is huge is making adjustments to lead scoring and nurturing, the process by which you do that to make sure that MQLs are actually qualified. We said it multiple times, like the sellers, the SDRs, depending on whether you're passing directly to your account executives or you have an SDR team, like they are the ones who are actually working the leads. So they're going to have the best visibility into how warm leads really are. If there's actually intent there, if the ICP is actually, if it's actually on or a good fit from an ICP perspective, and you need a system, and last plug, I promise, like Acton, like marketing automation solution to really go and make those scoring adjustments that you can limit the leads that you're passing that are poor and really focus on the stuff that's going to convert for your team. But at the end of the day, it all does come down to trust.
Yeah, definitely. That's definitely very important. And I loved how you've sliced and diced this topic. So thank you both for delving into this really. So we got a few questions in. So I would say let's move on to the Q&A section. So let's start with a question from Jason. So he's asking, what are you seeing as it relates to marketing qualified leads and sales qualified leads? So I think he wants to say what successful companies adopt, how did they go about it? I don't know if Tom, perhaps you want to take it.
Yeah.
Question 11.
Yeah, I think I'm understanding the question. I would say from an MQL perspective, okay, sorry, give me 1 sec. I guess if we're looking at like conversion rates between the two, is what I'm getting from the question, between like marketing qualified and sales qualified, I would say that most organizations should aim for somewhere around like 80-85%. So starting from the beginning, I'd say if you're passing 100 MQLs, you want 80 to 85 of those to become sales qualified. And for us, when I'm thinking of sales qualified, I would say they are a lead that the rep has taken a look at, who has gotten a lead, and determined this is workable in my mind. So in that 15 to 20%, there's going to be, you might have customers that made it through the system. You might have junk data. You have limited control over some things when it comes to leads coming in. But you should be aiming to get at least 80% of your leads are accepted by the sales team. And then from a sales qualified perspective, I mean, if it depends on what you determine sales qualified as. Is that the initial demo booked? Is that like the meeting is booked and there's an opportunity created? I think it depends a little bit, but depending on what that portion looks like for your organization. But yeah, I'd say the thing that's immediately measurable across companies is definitely that conversion rate from marketing qualified to sales qualified of like 80-ish, 85%. Mm-hmm. And apologize if that wasn't the exact question, but that's what I got from it.
Yeah, if not, let us know, Jason. So let's see. Okay, I can see the question, like the question in here: demand generation versus lead generation. So yes, who wants to take that? Or do both? He's asking. Yeah. Do one or do both?
Well, I think you're probably better qualified to take that one.
Yeah, I can take this one. I mean, the way I look at demand generation versus lead generation is a function, and lead generation has become more of an activity. And that hasn't always been the case. But like when I look at a demand generation that's doing, and I guess in modern marketing teams, their focus is a combination of developing the brand and generating leads as an active or as an outcome of that. So your focus isn't just bringing leads in the door. I think like that's the reason demand generation has kind of become a thing, is because in antiquated systems, like your goal is let's get as many MQLs in as possible and let the sales team figure it out from there. And demand generation kind of creates this different piece where, yeah, you're pulling in these leads, these MQLs, but your real goal is to create demand for your company and your solution. And hopefully this creates more of an inbound engine and isn't entirely just pulling in names and letting the sales team kind of run with it. So you do have a function of both. I think like ultimately, if you're only relying on inbound, you're only going to grow as fast as the market dictates. But if you're doing the lead generation and creating opportunities for your sales team to do some outbound activity and kind of identifying good opportunities for them to do more, again, outbound action or activities, you're going to grow at a much higher rate. Yeah, so the answer is definitely both.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I've got one more. I think this is for you, Dom, as well. It just came through. What are the common mistakes that a marketing team might do that can lead to no inbound leads generated? Or actually for your team as well, from your sales perspective.
Yeah, I mean,
Cool.
I'm hoping this means like you can't get inbound started. Because if you're going from something to nothing, I would definitely say take a look at your forms, take a look at your SEO, take a look at your marketing automation or whatever your intake solution is to make sure that there's no breaks that are causing the inbounds to stop flowing. Because yeah, if you go from 10 to 0 week over week or in a month, like that's probably a more technical issue than anything. If your goal is kicking it off, I would say the channels I've seen the most success, and I've never worked, I shouldn't say that. It's been a long time since I worked for a company that was starting from scratch. So I'll put that out there. Like this is from someone who's mostly worked at like SMB, upper SMB up to like the lower enterprise. The channels that work early on are definitely going to be search is a good one, because that's how you kind of get in front of what people are looking for specifically and identify those keywords that are going to be relevant for what you're selling. And the other one is content. I think there's a lot of companies out there who have developed a really strong brand presence by creating content that was relevant to their ICP. And because of that, when they're in the market for a solution that kind of resonates, they already know what to look at. I don't have any like specific examples of companies that do that, but yeah, content is a good one, because if I don't know, if I'd say like Gartner and Forrester are companies that kind of are focused on content, and that's how they have developed as organizations. And if you look at them, like I don't get a lot of outbound from them. I don't know how much they do, but I'm confident they have a strong inbound engine because of the way they position themselves in the market.
Okay. I think we have time for one more question. From Tanya. She's asking, what are the most recommended activities to do post lead generation?
Yeah, I think it's definitely a mix of, phone, email, LinkedIn. It really depends on what, I guess, level of act or data that you have on this lead that has come, through your website or that you've generated, on a social channel. One of the big things that ZoomInfo like really prides themselves on is the speed to lead. So how fast you follow up with that lead. And we try and field all of our leads within under 90 seconds. So like a form gets filled on our website, it's in an SDR's hand, and it's being called on almost in real time. And I would say you definitely want to lean on phone first, and then drop them an email, and then try to engage with them. But I think the biggest thing is that a lot of companies, they do a great job generating inbound leads, but then their SDR team follows up with the lead maybe an hour later or 2 hours later after that form was filled out. And what that leads to is now your potential buyer, the person who's potentially interested in evaluating your tool, has now gone on to the next website on Google and is engaging with a different company and engaging with a different company. It's like the same thing when you go to buy like a pair of shoes online. You might look on one website, and then you see if you can find them a bit cheaper, and then you can you shop around a little bit more, and it's really capturing that person's interest as soon as possible. And the best way that you can do that, in my opinion, is call them, get them on the phone, engage in that conversation, understand what it is they're ultimately trying to achieve or what, pain points they're looking to solve, and have that conversation, and then, get them in front of the sales team who's going to be running, the product demo as soon as possible. Like if you can have that initial conversation, SDR to prospect, and then that meeting is booked for 2 hours later, it's fresh, it's top of mind. The person's, more likely to show up to that call because, you're following up this lead in real time when this pain point is at the top of this person's head.
Okay. Yeah. Thank you, team. Thanks for sharing. So, I love the engagement with this webinar, and I love hearing your insights, Tim and Dom. So thank you very much for sharing today. We've got a few more questions, but time is up. So we will be following up with everyone after the webinar. So as a reminder, we will be sending the recording of this webinar a bit later today in case you want to rewatch it or share it with your colleague. So, and until next time, I wish you a very good rest of the day, wherever you are. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, guys.